This is a great story. I love this. So here's the question. I'm going to tell you a story about a patient, and I want you to wonder what was really going on with this guy. So I went to see him. He was a 30-something-year-old man that supposedly came in for chest pain, right? And when I walked in the room, this is where I started to get curious. I looked at his blood pressure, and you can see on the picture that I'm going to include those purple blood pressure readings. The first one, when he first got there, was really high. It was like 170 something over 112 or 110, or I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was pretty high. What's a normal blood pressure? 120 over 80. So this one's super high. But then where I get curious was when you watched the subsequent blood pressures, eventually his blood pressure came down, not to normal, but significantly so it was like 170 something over 120 to like 120 over 90. And the interesting thing was, we never gave him any blood pressure medicine to lower his blood pressure. So something happened without that medication that lowered his blood pressure. So I got really curious about that. And again, the question that I'm trying to ask is, what's really going on for this person? In other words, what's the real diagnosis? And how can I help him? So what's the real diagnosis? And then what's the best treatment for that, okay? So he comes in talking about chest pain. And when I first started talking to him, like immediately my sense in the room was, wow, this guy is amped up. He is just like running on adrenaline. I can feel the anxiety of that. I can feel the high energy. Again, that kind of added to my curiosity of what's going on in this guy's life. What's really going on that's brought him into the ER? So the story was, he had some chest pain, he checked his blood pressure, it was really high, and he came in, worried he was having a heart attack, a very common thing people come in with. Now, my intuition when he walked in was that he was not having a heart attack for a lot of reasons. Because of his age, he didn't have a ton of risk factors. He didn't appear to me to be someone who was having a heart attack. And by that time that I saw him, I had already reviewed some of the initial tests that we have done. Now, intuition's not perfect. We want to be better than that. That's why we do blood tests. We get objective things to make sure and evaluate him. And usually in the ER, the kind of treatment that we would give this guy is we would make sure he's not having a heart attack or something serious. And I was pretty sure he wasn't early on in my interaction with him, given everything that I had known. And then two, you want to take care of the other stuff like the blood pressure. So a common thing would have been make sure he's not having a heart attack, lower his blood pressure, send him home. But I wanted to dig a little deeper. And I got curious when I saw his blood pressure had gone down on its own without us giving him any medication. That's what I wanted to get into. Now it turns out that we did give him medicine for pain. So the first possibility that I was like is, okay, maybe he came in pain and distress. We took away his pain, we treated his pain, and then his blood pressure came down. So an elevated blood pressure is a normal physiologic response to pain. When people experience pain, you've got more adrenaline running in your system. That stimulates your heart to beat faster and stronger, stimulates your blood vessels to tighten up and support and basically send blood to the muscles. The muscles in the part of your body that sound is gonna bother me. To the fight or flight response and get it to your muscles, right? So it's entirely possible that his blood pressure was high because of pain. We treated his pain and his blood pressure came down to closer to a normal level. But because of how amped up and the anxiety and the stress in there when I walked into that room, I was suspicious that there was really something else going on, and that something else going on explained everything for why he was here. Not only why he was stressed and had chest pain, but why his blood pressure was elevated. And if we could actually get to that thing, then we could really treat him. That would be the root cause of what is really going on for him. So I was talking to him a little bit, and I just asked, and patients love this question. I said, is there any stress going on in your life? Like, what's going on in your life? We are holistic people. We're not just, Bob's blood pressure and Bob's cholesterol and Bob's coronary artery disease or blockages in your heart. So I opened that can of worms and I said, what's going on in your life? He took a deep breath and he said, I've been under a lot of stress the last month. I got a new boss at work. I'm worried I'm going to lose my job. I'm the provider for my family. I've got kids. For the last month, I've been really, really stressed about that. tell me more. He goes on and on to describe how he feels, and I would say, well, how does it feel? And he's like, well, it just, I get so much energy, whatever, and sometimes it's kind of tightness and it's here. It's like, that sounds to me like anxiety. It sounds like stress and anxiety that kind of manifests in the chest, this chest tightness stuff, which is exactly what he came in for, was kind of chest pain. The other thing was he noticed he had some kind of heartburn, acid reflux. I think sometimes this takes a toll on our stomach, the gastric lining of our stomach. We can get gastritis and ulcers. All of a sudden, we started to get somewhere. And I was like, this is what's really going on with this guy. He's stressed out because of stuff at work, and it is manifesting in the rest of his life. It's taking a toll on his body. So sure, his blood pressure's going up. He's getting some anxiety symptoms, chest pain. He maybe has an underlying gastritis, ulcer. I can treat all that with pills, right? Like, I can throw pills at his blood pressure. We can throw pills at this. But it's getting at the underlying cause of stress, like what can be done about his job situation. I mean, that's the real root, is how can you feel more secure at his job? Have a stable work situation. But then the other thing is, how is he coping with stress? So I would ask him about it. Like, well, how do you cope with this? Some alcohol, food. He was eating a bunch of fast food and junk food. He was using a lot of temporary short-term coping mechanisms that in the long run do damage to your body, your relationships, and they're ultimately unhealthy, right? We know this. What are your maladaptive coping mechanisms? We all have them, including denial. I'm going to deal with this later. I don't know what to do, so I'm going to put it off. Sometimes that can be very useful, but in the long term, if we never deal with things, they're going to come back and get us. And I see people end up in the ER like this all the time. So then I got into it and I said, okay, describe what this feels like. So he kind of told me the anxiousness, checking all this stuff, the anxiety, and just he had problems sleeping. He couldn't sleep because he was ruminating and worrying. I mean, this stuff all spirals down. So then I said, okay, contrast that with, what's the opposite of that? How do you want to feel? And he was like, relaxed, at ease, da-da-da. And so I said, okay, let's reverse engineer this. That's the end state that you want. What works for you to get there? What do you do to get relaxed and at peace? That was another big one he said. So he said a few things. He said, church. I was like, that is awesome. Church, taking a walk, being social with people, connecting with people, exercise. All of a sudden, the wheels were turning for him. This was not somebody that I needed to spell it out for. Once we got there and he understood the difference of his life in stress and how he'd been doing that to the best of his ability, because he wasn't even aware and conscious of what was going on, and he was doing his best, but it wasn't working. It was spiraling down. They were maladaptive coping mechanisms. Like, he was not coping with stress very well. But we contrasted that with the end state that he really desired, peace, relaxation, to deal with the stress in a healthy way. And then he was able to remember and bring to the surface things that worked for him, positive resources, adaptive coping mechanisms with stress. And he could see himself doing this in the future. So I was like, what are you going to do the next time that you feel stressed about this? He was like, take a walk, call somebody. And he'd started to plug those in and see himself doing that. I love this story because that changed that man's life. He will forever now be conscious of his own stress, fight or flight, adrenaline reaction to stress and how that hurts his body. And he has now switched that out for a much healthier, for him, for his mind, for his body, for his blood pressure, for his heart, way of coping with stress, because we all have stress. There will be stress in life. We cannot get rid of it. I love it. I love it. We changed his life. Was he a heart attack that I saved? No. Did we save his life in that moment? Absolutely not. But I love that we got at what was really going on for him. The real diagnosis, which was underlying stress at work, and a treatment, that will actually get at that and make a difference for him in the rest of his life. I love that story.